A new season, new weapon changes. That means we're taking a look at a brand new top 10 loadouts here for Season 6 within Warzone. As we go along, let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree with this list? Is there any weapon you'd put in the top 10? Whatever the case may be, feel free to let me know. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like down below. Let's aim for 1,000 likes on this video. And of course, if you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing running all things Warzone, Season 6, Vanguard very soon. We got you covered with all of that. My friends over at G Fuel also bumped up code Espresso to 30% off if you guys want to check that out. Get a restock, try something out for the very first time, whatever the case may be. That link's in the description below. And finally, if you guys do want to support the channel a little further, if you plan on picking up the Season 6 Battle Pass or anything like that, it is entirely optional, so never feel pressure to do so. But if you'd like to support the channel, you can use code Espresso in the support a creator functionality of the in-game store. If you decide to, tweet me a picture. I'd love to shout out some of your generous support in upcoming videos. That said, let's jump right into the loadouts and the changes at hand. So Season 6 update kicked off, and with that we saw a few changes to weapon tuning. Admittedly, probably not as much as many people may have considered or would have thought would be coming with the Season 6 update. That weapon tuning only included 4 weapons directly tuned to the total of 8 weapon attribute changes across those 4 weapons. And then we had a 5th weapon adjusted in only its magazine attachments. So when you consider the state of the meta, the balancing across seasons 4, 5, and 6, it really hasn't shifted a whole lot drastically. But there are changes in those sort of power rankings of those top 10 and some weapons that have crept in and crept out of that top 10, as well as the ones that are maybe just on the outside looking in, those honorable mentions. So what we saw change here with this was the tuning of the C58, EM2, MG82, and the Stoner, all from Black Ops Cold War. The C58 had a recoil increase, the EM2 had a recoil increase, the MG82 saw a gun kick increase, a recoil increase, a reload interrupt time increase, and a raise interrupt time increase, as well as the Stoner had its gun kick and recoil increased as well. The OTS only saw adjustments to the Spetsnaz 40-round mag and the VDV 40-round fast mag, in which both of those had some of their attributes changed as well. Nothing too critical to the overall gameplay experience though. So what do these changes do to the meta? Well, the EM2 to me was always that weapon that was kind of on the outside looking in. It was a more skilled weapon for sure because it had more kick than the C58, but did absolutely pack a punch. It was just something that in a lot of situations wouldn't necessarily be meta. It was absolutely a viable weapon, competitive in the right one even, but again, not quite top 10 material given that there's so many other things in situational uses that can outclass it. The C58 I think is still solid in the right hands, but does knock it down a peg or two. But again, right hands, you won't notice too much of a difference. The MG82, yeah, we'll talk about this one in a second because it feels like it actually got better, as crazy as that sounds, despite the changes discussed in the Season 6 patch notes. So it feels like that maybe this is bugged and accidentally reverted, but for now, it feels good regardless of why, and it actually, I think, moves back up in those power rankings. The Stoner, still solid, but again, knocked down a peg or two in the top 10 if you ask me. And finally, the OTS 9, with those magazine changes, minimal difference, nominal even. It's still incredibly viable. In the right hands, I'd still say it's a top SMG, but as we'll talk about, it does have a little bit of competition in that top SMG spot. But let's talk about these top 10 loadouts. As per normal, there aren't any particular or definitive 1 to 10 or 10 to 1 order, as each weapon has its own pros and cons, and situationally won't win every single gunfight at a close, medium, and long range. Not everything will be covered here on all the bases, so some will more universally be viable than others, while the latter ones discussed here will be a bit more situational, and you may have fun with them, but they may be a bit more selective in your loadout and nature. Now, starting out with this, I want to talk about one that I still think reigns supreme as what we talked about the last time we talked about weapon loadouts, that being the AK-47. The AK-47 still is incredible. Again, it was not touched so far based off of what we saw in the patch notes, pending no stealth changes, and it doesn't seem like there were any based off of feel. This, I usually run 2 builds with it. It depends on what I'm feeling like I want to use it with. The main build that I use is a medium to somewhat long range build here so that I can play rifle and SMG. I can take enemies out at a somewhat distance, but also get up in their face and take them out in close quarters. For this, I end up running the GRU suppressor, RPK barrel, axial arms 3x optic, Spetsnaz grip, and surprisingly, as of recently, I've been running the 45-round mag. I'm not challenging anything too far off of the distance, so those 15 rounds, I'll take the extra ADS and reload speed with a smaller mag in a lot of situations, even though, again, those may be minimal benefits. It's just something I've been playing around with, though if 45 is too little, absolutely still 60 is a great option as well. But if you're using the AK for a sniper support weapon, which I still think is one of, if not the best sniper support loadouts possible, an incredibly viable loadout is the regular suppressor for that added ADS and mobility properties you end up getting as opposed to the GRU. The Tiger Team Spot Spotlight, the Microflex LED, the Spetsnaz grip, and the 45 round mag. Now, noticeably there is no barrel on this. You're playing for a little bit more mobility and as well a little bit closer gunfights, so you're not going to need those bullet velocity or damage range really increasing modifiers, but you also want to be able to have your weapon up faster, so having things like that ADS time of a standard suppressor, that pinpoint precision of a red dot, but without the added magnification, the Tiger Team for added mobility, the grip to control the weapon's bounce, and again that 45 to allow you to reload a little bit quicker. It's a solid choice here in my opinion. But that's enough time talking about the AK. The MG82 is one that I think is going to be a main contender here for Season 6. And with that, as we talked about, it seems like it might be bugged. I don't know if that's the case, but we were shredding with it all last night and since Season 6 has started so far. Before this, I usually run the Agency Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, Axial Arms 3x Optic, Raider Stock, and the Field Agent foregrip. It definitely does require a little bit of getting used to when it comes to the recoil pattern of it. It still absolutely has a lot of kick as an MG, especially that fast firing of an LMG. It will always have that kind of super kick up high, but it's incredibly easy to control because the recoil properties are relatively just straight up. It does have some deviation there horizontally, but it's not something that is too terrible in terms of controlling. So if you can manage to do that, you are still and going to once again fry your enemies with the MG82. So absolutely think this made its way back up into the maybe even top 5 here of the top 10, but it's one that I definitely recommend. Now, the OTS-9 jumping over to some close quarters and SMG play is one that, again, was adjusted in those magazines, but I still don't think that it has too much a difference here in terms of the overall gameplay. It's still what I think is the best SMG, and to me, still the most fun as well. For this, though, I end up running the Sound Suppressor. A lot of people actually do want that GRU suppressor for the added damage range, and that's entirely cool. You can swap that out for sure, but personally, I don't feel like you need it, and I like the added ADS and speed bonuses you get with that, so it's a preference-based thing, but you also end up wanting to run the Task Force Barrel, KGB Skeletal Stock, and the Serpent Wrap, as well as that 40-round fast mag. Now, again, that was adjusted, but again, I think that the changes pretty much nominal. I don't notice them actually that much in game, so I'm not going to change too much of it. I will say though, again, if you need some help with that recoil, you can sacrifice the Serpent Wrap for it and maybe say put on a grip of some kind. That's probably the most expendable piece of that build in my opinion. Next though, talking SMG still, the one that I think has kind of regained its top position in the SMG meta is the MAC-10. It feels to be just hitting something different here after the update, but it is still phenomenally reliable, incredibly mobile, and again, can pack a punch. That fire rate can expend so many rounds into an enemy before they may even have a chance to end up reacting. So for this, I either run the Agency Suppressor or the Sound Suppressor. I've been going back and forth. I like those added mobility and handling attributes of the regular Sound Suppressor, but the Agency gets the job done as well. The Task Force Barrel, Tiger Team Spotlight for that added mobility, the Raider Stock, and the 53-round drum mag. Now, that is a build we've talked about many a times here on the channel, so don't want to get too far caught up on that one, but moving over to the fifth weapon of the top 5 per se before we jump into the second half of this is the XM4. Now this might seem like a little bit of an interesting one here because we haven't talked about this one too much. We talked about it when it was a sniper support weapon, when those dual rifle metas were a thing here, but truth be told, man, I played a ton with this weapon last night. I was running the Agency Suppressor, 13.5-inch Task Force Barrel, Axial Arms 3x Optic, Field Agent Grip, and the 60-round mag. Now this kind of feels like the M4 build from back in the day with Modern Warfare, but with a little bit more control on par as if it were, say, a direct crossover from like the M4 and maybe the Krig. Not as much control as the Krig, but not as much bounce as the M4. It's incredibly easy to manage if you know how to pull down on your thumbstick to mitigate it. That predetermined recoil pattern really isn't all that bad at all, and admittedly, again, I'd say this isn't the best weapon right now, but I'd say out of the couple of hours that I played with it exclusively last night, it's one of the most fun weapons I think that I've used recently. It's just that deviation that feels really good in terms of the weapon meta. So I'm putting that one up here on the fringe of the top 5 with it, but moving over then to the next couple of weapons, the C58 is next up on deck. Again, in the right hands, I don't think that it's too much of a difference, but for those that may not be able to control the recoil as much, you might notice a difference here with it, in which that's the reason why it's knocked down a couple of pegs. I'd say the Agency Suppressor, Task Force, or Ranger Barrel is still your best option. Axial Arms 3 3x optic, 55 round drum mag, and the field agent grip is the way to go on this one. Again, talked about this build plenty of times, so don't want to stick around on that one too much. The stoner is what I'd say next though for mid to long range. It still has incredible TTK at a distance, and so for that I'd run the agency suppressor, task force barrel, axial arms 3x optic, radar pad, and the field agent grip. This one might just be a little bit more overshadowed by the recent influx of the MG82 use, but if you're an MG player and want something that packs a punch big time, this is still a good one to do it. The Bullfrog though is one that I think is kind of dropped down a little bit in the power rankings, but is still there just barely. I had some fun with this one here and actually pulled off a couple of clips that I did not expect to with this as of yesterday. But the sound suppressor, task force barrel, tiger team spotlight, KGB skeletal stock, and the serpent wrap is that build we've used for ages, and I would still highly recommend. Now the final weapon in terms of the regular rifle, SMG, LMG, and all that kind of play before we jump over into our standard, which is always number 10 out of 10 of the Swiss, is the QBZ. This one's still viable in that weapon that, just like the Krig pre-patch, is something that is easy to pick up and use, but I don't know if I'd take it for all the engagements that I can think of. It's a good pick up and use weapon, but if you want to be more situationally involved, it might not be the best choice. For this though, I usually run the agency suppressor, task force barrel, axial arms 3x optic, field agent grip, and the 60 round mag. And again, finally clearing out that 10 out of 10, as always, just for those that love sniping, the Swiss is still there as that dominant sniper, I think, over the car. For this, sound suppressor, combat recon, 5 milliwatt laser, 7 round, and serpent grip, that's been the go-to for months now, and that I'd still recommend. Now, that said, that is my pick for the top 10 here. If it differs from yours, that's totally fine. The nice part about the current meta, I guess you could call it, within Warzone is that there is still a lot of room for honorable mentions. The PPSH was honestly one that I was thinking was going to be a contender here at this one, though not gonna lie, kind of withheld it from the sort of air quote top 10 of what we just discussed because it failed me quite a bit in the last day or so since Season 6 has started. One game in particular that just set me off, it was looking like a heater of a game. I think I was nearing like 10 kills or something with still over 100 players up, which is something that in my lobbies we never see, especially when we run into pros like every other matchup it seems. It lost outright to a MAC 10, so I might revisit this one at a later point, but for the few gunfights that I lost with, and then that one in particular, kind of just set me over the edge, to which I'm just like, all right, that's not going in the top 10. The Farah absolutely is in the mix here at this, and honestly, if I were to swap out one weapon of the top 10 that we talked about, that'd be the QBZ. I would probably put those very comparable, but given that we're talking about SMGs, LMGs, snipers on top of the rifles, it's hard to fit all of that again in the top 10. So that is absolutely a weapon that I would highly place in there as well. But then you also have a bunch of other weapons like your M4A1 from Modern Warfare. You end up having the ability to use things like the Grau as well, making a little bit of a comeback in recent seasons also. The Bruin, decent weapon here also. The PKM, MW AUG with 5.56, the Cold War and Modern Warfare MP5 both having their own sort of niches here within meta as well. The Krig still being in there as an easy to use weapon, but with so much kick as of recently, it might not be top 10 material, but still absolutely viable and still very much so usable. And that's kind of the beauty of where we're at here in terms of the current meta within Warzone. There are still, again, as the last couple of seasons, so many weapons you can choose from. It just really comes down to which ones can produce the best outcomes for as many situations as possible that aren't just necessarily niche weapons. So that's where I'm at here with these weapons today. That said, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. I would love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. What do you think of these loadouts here? Do you agree? Do you find one of these weapons to be definitively the best? Maybe something that we didn't talk about that should be on this list? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know your thoughts. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below, and of course, if you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Warzone, Season 6, Vanguard coming up very soon, anything COD related, we have you covered, so hit that subscribe button if you're new. That said, if you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to chat with me outside of YouTube, so if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever the case may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care, and peace.